Let's take a look at the fifth essay, the final essay for the course. Just say a few things about it, what I was thinking of when I wrote the assignment, and maybe some advice. In light of the last three readings, Gustafson, Lewis, and Schultz, does religious faith and immortality, in your opinion, make the death of a loved one any easier than it is if we have no such faith? Why or why not? Let's start with the first part of it. In light of the last three readings, Gustafson, Lewis, and Schultz, what I mean to say there is that please keep these readings in mind, or keep some of these readings in mind as you write this essay. And I want to let you know you don't have to write about all three of these things. You don't have to include discussion of all three of these authors in your essay. You could, just really think about one is fine. And, at the end of the day, you're writing your opinion about this particular, your answer to this particular question. So whatever serves your purpose in answering that question, make use of that. And again, do not feel any duty to discuss all three of these works if that is not required. You can certainly do that. You can make use of it all, and that's fine. But do not feel that you have to somehow dutifully go through each one of these authors. You don't have to do that to do this assignment. But let me tell you, the question itself: does religious faith in immortality make the death of a loved one any easier than it is if we have no such faith? I have to tell you openly that is a question that is inspired by C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed, which I think is a remarkable book. I think I might have said in previous videos that I like all of the readings for this course. I think they're all great readings. And they're on the syllabus because I found them and they made a big impact on me. They helped me think about different aspects of philosophy of death. But there's really only two great works of literature on the syllabus, and that's Plato's Phaedo and C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed, which are, like the others, really interesting and profound philosophical works, but are also great works of literature, just great writing, done by someone who's a superior writer as well as being a serious philosopher. So I have a sort of unbounded interest and admiration for this book by C.S. Lewis. But I think one of the really challenging aspects of C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed is that we have a committed Christian, C.S. Lewis, who is giving his account of his grief for his wife. And I have to say that if we read the book carefully, we see that it really isn't so clear that his religious faith is propping him up. It isn't clear that his religious faith is making things easier for him. I'm not saying that it's clear that it's not, but I think we can all think, once we've read the book, of passages in which it does seem that his religious faith is not the answer, that it's the problem. Now, viewed as a whole, I don't think that would be fair to characterize the book as a whole as in any way a complaint on his part of how being a Christian is making the grieving process harder. On the other hand, there are certainly passages which may seem to indicate it. So, in any case, I would never have thought of this question had I not read C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed, and which does not mean that you have to focus on the book, but just to let you know that in my own thinking, that this question emerges out of reading and repeated reading of Lewis's book. One of the things that I hope becomes at least plausible in this course, this last part of the course, is that Gustafson and Lewis have some very interesting points of connection. And again, that is interesting because Gustafson's essay is an academic essay trying to come up with a convincing definition of the emotional state of grief, whereas Lewis is a very personal account of one person's grief as they live it. So it would be interesting in any case to see whether whether Gustafson's ideas were at all reflected in Lewis's actual experience. I happen to think they are, and I've pointed out in the videos, how so. Which is to say, I think that writing about Lewis and writing about Gustafson are kind of a natural pair, and that the odd one in the mix is Walter Schultz's The Problem of Death, which is an essay that I really like. And clearly, Lewis and Gustafson are both writing about grief. They're writing about this experience, this particular experience of grief, whereas Schultz is not. I think that Schultz is in some interesting areas of commonality, especially with Lewis, because I think at the heart of Schultz's essay is sort of thinking about how do we actually conceive of the dead. So that being, of course, a major part of Lewis's book, thinking about how to conceive of his wife now that she's died, struggling with that, struggling with all sorts of aspects of that. I would think that there's a definite connection between the subject matter, although Schultz is, he's doing something different. He's trying to characterize what he takes to be the common educated view of death in his time and culture, and finds obviously some very interesting connections with the conceptions of death in Homeric Greece and the ancient Israelites, sort of before Plato, before Christianity. What he calls the pre-metaphysical stage of our conception of death, whereas we're kind of in the post-metaphysical one. So he's got different fish to fry, Schultz. So I happen to think that there's some interesting connections there, that there's some relevant things in Schultz for understanding Lewis, especially. But if you don't see that, or if that's not relevant to your answer, don't force it and throw in a little mention of Schultz that doesn't really add to your point. Feel free to ignore Schultz if it doesn't help, and feel free to make use of it. Because one thing that Schultz is doing is conceiving of a view of death that has nothing like immortality, nothing like a belief in God or any spiritual aspect to it, and maybe that's easier. Maybe that allows us to deal with the deaths of loved ones easier. I don't know. So feel free to make use of any of these authors that you wish, and ignore any ones that you wish in your discussion. The question itself: does religious faith in immortality, in your opinion? Of course, I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm asking you to take your own stand. Make the death of a loved one any easier than it is if we have no such faith? I hope that question's clear. I couldn't put it any clearer now than I actually wrote it. But if you want any further clarification, just email me or call me, and I'll respond. And finally, we have the why or why not, which is kind of a cliche. The end of every essay question seems to be a why or why not, but it's important to put it in there because I am asking you your opinion on this question. There is, of course, no right or wrong answer in my mind. So you're not being evaluated on whether you say yes or no. Obviously, you're being evaluated on how well you can express yourself and how well you can argue for your opinion, how well you can support your opinion. So the why or why not is important, right? Because it emphasizes that, obviously an essay like this is really about taking a position of a certain sort, but especially explaining, clarifying, and arguing for that position. So if you have any additional questions, as I said, feel free to contact me by with any specifics.